This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. And, do the offer now. Freely you have given and freely we have received. Please accept this free will offering from our hearts. Okay. Be seated. All right, boys. Here's my click. Here we go. So, what I've been trying to get for you guys the last couple of weeks as we head towards Easter is I wanted to get you familiar with the disciples, because we've talked about Jesus' ministry before, about things he teaches, and we've talked about his miracles. But I want you to get some familiarity with the disciples, because imagine this, all right? Somebody comes up to you and says, I'm the greatest programmer, I'm the greatest soccer player, I'm the greatest magician, whatever it is that you can identify with. I'm the greatest soccer player that ever lived. Do you believe them? Mm-hmm. But it's very different if you go to a soccer game and you see a guy playing soccer and he's clearly the best on the field, right? It's different if somebody says, I'm the best at something, versus showing you that they're the best at something. And one of the things that the disciples are going through is being shown that Jesus is God. Jesus doesn't come up in the story and say, hey, my name's Jesus of Nazareth. Nice to meet you. I'm the Son of God. I am the greatest that there ever was. Come follow me, and it's going to be fantastic. Doesn't do that. He says, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. There's nothing else. He doesn't say I'm God. He doesn't say I'm a prophet. He just says, come follow me. And so what's happening is this in these stories of healings and teachings is that these disciples are having to clue in and figure out who this guy is. Is he just a really smart guy? Is he a Moses? Is he the one, the Christ, the Savior, who we've been prophesying about for hundreds of years? Is he God himself? And so, I mean, this is the crux of the Easter story, is who is Jesus, right? I mean, who is this guy? And so as we're leading up, people are being forced to make a decision. I mean, think about it. There are a lot of things you don't have to make a decision on. Like, you meet a new person tomorrow, you go to school and some new guy's there. And you go, who is this guy? Do I like him? Do I not like him? A week goes by and you go, I don't know. Maybe I like Dave, maybe I don't like Dave, I don't really know. But eventually, you might have to make a decision. And that's what's happening is Jesus is doing enough stuff in the world that these people are having to make a decision as to who they think he is. Pharisees and the Sadducees, the guys who are running the place, they don't like it because they're following him. So that's kind of where we're going with all this. We showed you the tribes of Israel last week to try to give you an idea of these disciples, each represent or come from a different tribe. Thaddeus, Matthew, Judas, John, Andrew, Peter, Thomas, Philip, James, Bartholomew, Simon, and James. When you go out in the world, I talk about these Daniel stories being famous. Who's the famous disciples? Well, let's see. Yeah, Peter is a famous disciple. The Catholic Church, you've probably heard of the Catholic Church. Well, it starts with him. All right? So 2,000 years later, the church he started is still going. That's pretty good longevity right there. Who's the other famous one? John, right here, John. The book of Revelation, we talk about at New Church Day, Holy City, New Jerusalem, the woman clothed with the sun, the dragon that we slay with the piñata, the Yeah, dragon clip. Yeah, we don't slay with the pinata. The dragon is the pinata that we slay with the sword. Right. And end of the world kind of thing, that all comes from John. That book is written by John. So like when you hear people in this world, outside of this room, talking about the end of the world, boy, a lot of it comes from this guy right here. So I mean, these disciples, I mean, they have a long-term effect on the world. Thomas. Oh, you don't want to be a doubting Thomas? Thomas was the one who didn't necessarily believe that Jesus had risen. So I'm hoping to get you guys some familiarity with these names and these guys, because they're still relevant 2,000 years later. And let me tell you, 2,000 years later, they're not going to be talking about me or you or anybody else in this room, most likely. But they're still talking about Judas, because Judas is the one who betrayed Jesus. So the story that we have today, all right, if you can kind of remember, Christmas story, where was Jesus born? In the little town of Bethlehem. Bingo, all right? But Jesus was from Nazareth. Nazareth is up here. So Joseph and Mary lived up here. They came down to Bethlehem for the taxation of the Christmas story. They went down to Egypt because people were trying to kill Jesus, baby Jesus, and then they came back up and they ended up living in Nazareth when it was clear. So the stories of Jesus, for the most part, happen up in here. Here's the Sea of Galilee. So when Jesus calms the water, it's up on this sea. A lot of stuff happens with feeding the 5,000. It's up in this area. But the temple is in Jerusalem. So what happens with these chapters we're doing today is they come out of Nazareth, cross over the Jordan, and they start coming down through this area of Perea, come down, they cross back over at Jerusalem and come up to Jericho and down to Jerusalem. So this is the trip, and the stories that we have today are from this trip, down, over, and in. All right? So, here we go. Again, keep in mind, Jesus is showing them who he is. Who he is. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, those are the most famous of the disciples, with him and led them up on a high mountain where they were all alone. There he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi," and rabbi is a word that means teacher. "Teacher, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say. They were so frightened. Then a cloud appeared and covered them, and a voice came from the cloud, "This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. Son of Man, you know who that is? Jesus, right? Don't say anything until I've risen from the dead. They don't quite make this connection, though, okay? They kept the matter to themselves, discussing what rising from the dead meant. What's he talking about? And they asked him, "Why do the teachers of the law, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, say that Elijah must come first?" Jesus replied, "To be sure, Elijah does come first and restores all things. Why then is it written that the Son of Man must suffer much and be rejected? But I tell you, Elijah has come, and they have done to him everything they wished, just as it is written about him." What's he talking about there? What's this about Elijah? Do you remember Elijah? Maybe remember the name, not the stories? I'll give you a refresher, okay? So the most famous story, perhaps, of Elijah is the one where it's Baal's prophets and Elijah call on the Lord for fire, and Elijah makes his altar. Baal's prophets make their altar, 400 of them, and they call Baal, Baal, Baal. No fire shows. They prophesy for hours and hours and hours, and there's no fire. Elijah says, dump the water on my altar, dump the water, and whoosh, boom, the whole thing goes on fire. And what happens to Elijah then? King Ahab and his wife Jezebel say, let's kill him. When Jesus says they did to Elijah what they wanted to, they chased him around, made him scared, put him away, and he ran for his life. So Jesus is saying the Elijah of their time is John the Baptist. And you know what they've done to him? Put him in prison. And he hasn't been beheaded yet, but he's going to be. So Elijah, John the Baptist, Moses, all these lead characters represent the Word in our life. And it's a picture of how people will often want to abuse the Word. They left that place and they went to Galilee. Well, Galilee's this whole area, so they probably somewhere up here at Capernaum. They come down. They left that place and passed through Galilee. Jesus did not want anyone to know where they were because he was teaching his disciples. He said to them, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. But they did not understand what he meant, and they were afraid to ask him about it. They came to Capernaum. Oh, there it is. There's Capernaum. So they came to Capernaum. So they must have been starting up here. Came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, what were you arguing about on the road? But they kept quiet, because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. The 12 disciples are arguing about, among them, who is the greatest. Sitting down, Jesus called on the 12 and said, anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all. He took a little child and placed among them. Taking the child into his arms, he said to them, whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. Then they were on their way to Jerusalem, with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Again, he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him. We are going to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. Just to be clear, the law is the word, all right? So the law is like Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Those books are known as the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles. Gentiles, people not part of the Jewish community, so the Romans, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him, and kill him. And 3 days later he will rise. So if the disciples are arguing about who's the greatest, do they really get what their mission is? Not really. Because you're not supposed to follow the Lord to become great. Right? You're supposed to follow the Lord to learn how to be nice to other people. So our last little thing here shows you that these guys they don't quite get it yet. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. That sounds like a really great request from their part. I can imagine you two coming up to Dad, well, I want you to do for me whatever I ask. Now, if that's the question, what are you going to be asking me for? Something that I want to give you or something that I don't want to give you, huh? Oh, Dad, I want you to do whatever I ask. Give me all the ice cream I want today. Yeah. He says, what do you want me to do for you? They replied, let one of us sit on your right and other at your left in your glory. He says, no, that's here we go. He says, you don't know what you are asking. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? So he knows what's coming ahead. He knows he's going to be crucified. He knows that the bad things are coming. Can you guys do this? Yes, we can, they answered. He said to them, "You will drink the cup I drink, and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared." When the 10 heard this, so the 10 other disciples, they said, what a good idea. We're glad these two thought they were the best. You think they were upset about this? They became indignant. Imagine, Liam and Dylan came in here and they said, "Todd, we want you to tell everybody else that we're the best." How would you two feel about that? What? We've been here the entire time. Where they go? That's what these guys are doing. They said, Jesus called them together and said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles, so the rulers of the Romans, lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. But not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be the first must be the slave. For even the Son of Man," he's like, "even I, did not come here to be served." I didn't come around here to say, "Hey, I'm great, come everybody do stuff for me." I came here to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. So he's trying to get them to understand what this is all about. You know, so much in the ancient world it was about being the greatest. He's like, no. We're here to work. We're here to be the workers, not the rulers. So these disciples are slowly starting to be taught and shown what Jesus is about. Right? They see Moses. They see Elijah with him. They see his clothes changing. They go, "Oh, I'm seeing something." And now he's trying to take that showing and the teaching, saying, "Look, this is what it means. You're not to try to be the greatest. Serve other people." That's
Lord, help us hear these stories and take them into our heart and see them as the disciples saw them and go through the process so that we may, like the disciples, come to the conclusion that you are not just a man, but that you are God himself visiting us here on earth. Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
So, these chapters of 9 and 10 of Mark are about this journey. Where my clicker go? Here we go. So it's important to kind of get this map in your head. And one of the things that happens on the journey that we didn't talk about with the kids is this interaction about goodness. Excuse me. Jesus is traveling, and a young man runs up to Jesus and he says, "Good teacher, what do you need to get into heaven?" And Jesus responds with this, "Why do you call me good?" And it's an interesting quote because it's so very easily misinterpreted or just not understood. And so today I kind of want to just take some time to say, all right, well, this is that lead up to Palm Sunday, which is only next week. And what is it that Jesus is asking for in this question of, why do you call me good? Because it becomes important as we understand salvation as to what this one line means. There's a lot more hidden in here than perhaps we had originally would have figured. As I was saying to the boys, this is happening on his way down to Judea. Notice that when he comes out, he comes across the Jordan. Doesn't go through Samaria. It would be a lot more direct route. But the idea here is that Judea represents our will. Samaria represents our intellect. Galilee, it's about the external actions of our life. So he's been acting in Galilee, Jesus has been acting in Galilee to reform the external actions of our life. But then he comes out of the Holy Land and comes down and says, I'm going to enter into our will. It's like what's happening here is he's putting in this simple desire to be good. It's not an intellectual thing. It's not a, how do I understand things? It's just that suddenly he's putting in this desire. I need to be a good person. That's where this starts. And this is also where there's a lot of resources and resentment and effort to prevent that little desire to be good to really manifest. Because in order for that to manifest, well, guess what? There's going to have to be some changes around here. And what's one thing that people don't like to give up? Their power. And that includes the hell's own power in our own life. They don't like giving that up. They don't want us to change. And so it's going to start marshaling everything it's got and bring it up to combat this new enemy, this desire to be good. This is why the Lord gets crucified, and as we would expect, this has an effect on our ability to be good. Do we crucify the Lord or do we accept the Lord? So when the story happens about why do you call me good, it's kind of pinging off how we understand the Lord in our life. All right? So here's just a quick interaction. All right, good teacher. And it's in I put the story in the order of service. I'm going to read this along. All right? So he's just been around the little children. The little children come to me. And then he starts on his way, and a man ran up to him and fell on his knees before him. Good teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Why do you call me good? Jesus answered. What does that mean? There are different takes on how to read this. Why do you call me good? Is it, why do you call me good? Because only God is good and I'm not God. Is that the implication he's saying? And look, there are plenty of Christians who argue this exact idea. Jesus is not God. He is a really great guy. He's a prophet, whatever. There are Christians who say, no, he's not God. Only the Father is God. So is that the way to read it? Or, why do you call me good? As in, why do you call me good? Do you realize that I'm God? Is this like the disciples? Are you cluing in? Huh? Are you cluing in? I think my understanding of it is that this is all hinges on the idea of good teacher. As in, why do you call me good? Don't call me good because only God is good. Don't call me that if you just think that I'm a teacher. This is all about having kind of a reflection on our life and saying, are you going to take the things that I say on board because I'm God? Are you going to give me that kind of authority in your life? And I think that's what's going on here. Why do you call me good? Because you just seem to think that I'm just a teacher. Are you giving me the what's the word, the credibility, the authority in your life? Am I just a human teacher? Because God is the only source of goodness. So don't call me good if you don't think I'm God. So he's trying to draw this guy out into making a decision. So the story goes on. He says, no one is good except God alone. You know the commandments. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal, not give false testimony. You shall not defraud. Honor your father and your mother. So that's what he's being told to do. Well, how about us? Do we do those things? Do we do these things? I mean, you can read this like, okay, well, if you do those things, you're good. But if we look back at, say, the older Bible stories, we get like the creation story. God saw that all that he had made, and it was good. It was his goodness he sees in creation, because no one is good, and creation isn't good. It's God's goodness we see manifested in there. With this guy, this young man, and his hey, good teacher, with his enthusiasm, this is coming right off the interaction with children. And the reason I bring this up is because the implication is this man is innocent. It's youthful exuberance. I mean, my experience with young men is that we are an overconfident bunch of people. And that we see that we have the world by the tail. I've got it all figured out. I don't need you, Mom. I don't need you, Dad. I have it all sorted out. I can't believe you guys are so dumb because I'm only 20 years old and I've got it all sorted. That's my, yeah. that's young men. That's how I see it. And that's what this guy is doing. He's running up. Jesus, I got it all figured out. There's a little bit of grandstanding on his part saying, yeah, I got it. What do you need to do? It's like he's, what do you got to do? I got it done. Look at this guy right here. I am ready. Because when he lists off all those things, Jesus says, follow the commandments. He says, I've done those things since I was a youth. As if he's declaring this to his audience. Look at me. Look at how great I am. It's a young man who actually isn't a bad guy. He has a desire to be good, but he's got a problem. He's full of himself. He's got a big ego. And so these riches that Jesus then tells him to get rid of, the riches you have to get rid of, is all that full of yourselfness, right? How does Jesus respond to this guy? It says, he looked at him and loved him. Right? Jesus looked at him and loved him. One thing you lack. Go and sell everything you have and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. Give away all I have? I have a lot of stuff. But the stuff he wants to get rid of is that pride, that arrogance, that believing that I have goodness. I've got it. I've locked it down. I have spiritual riches. When Jesus takes up his cross and he tells us to take up our cross, that's being willing to endure the attacks from hell and being willing to give up that life of our natural self, that kind of puffed up ego-ness. We've got to give up all the desires and the prejudices and the belief that happiness is our own making. One of the things that we agree with in the new church with mainstream Christianity is this idea about meriting heaven. No person is inherently evil. The mind that we're given, the body, it's not inherently evil, but it's that mind of ours where it becomes a seat of our troubles because we start believing we are inherently good. Right? We start to think that we have ownership. We start to wonder, am I good enough to go to heaven? Well, no. No, you're not. And this is where it becomes this kind of tension. can you keep the commandments so perfectly that you're guaranteed a place in heaven? Like the disciples, hey, we want to be on your right and your left. Well, no, you're not really cut out for that, to be honest with you. You can't be so good that God just is bowled over and has to let you in. It just can't be done. Our life teaches us, our experience teaches us that every day, there's some evil that's knocking on our door and saying, hey, how about this? Every day. And so our own inclinations, we're always going to fall short somewhere, some way, somehow, maybe in small ways, maybe in big ways. But there's going to be, every day has its own trouble. And this is why the Lord says to the man, hey, it's impossible for rich men to go to heaven. It's impossible. If you think you're full of it and you've got it all, it's impossible. The disciples say, well, who can be saved? Who can do it? And Jesus says to them, well, with God, all things are possible. With men, it's impossible. It can't be done. You can't do this on your own. But with God, all things are possible. It is possible for us to recognize that we've been created in God's image and likeness. And it is possible for us to let Him fill that image with His likeness and His life and His goodness. But He can only do that to the extent that we empty out, we let go of all the riches that we think we have. To the extent that we decide to be servants and not masters, we can let go of that stuff and just empty our minds of this idea of how great we are. The conceit, the arrogance. Get rid of all of it and say, no, Lord, just fill me with what you've got. The notion that our own goodness is the source of all of our anxiety about not being good enough. Think about that. The idea that we are good enough or not good enough is a source of anxiety. Have I been good enough to go to heaven? Oh, I don't know. If we can let go of that good enough mentality, then all we have to worry about is, well, am I a vehicle for God's goodness? Am I letting that flow in? If I do that, I'm fine. Just let go of that notion that we own goodness, that we can achieve goodness, because we can't actually make ourselves good. It's a tricky line to walk, I know. But that's the idea here, is that you've got to just let go of that. And, to bring this back, it's about how it ties into salvation is even the angels have to do this. The reason why it's so important to get this idea of who are you calling good? Why do you call me good? To get this answer right is because the angels, after death in heaven, can only go into heaven to the extent that they allow the idea that they are not good into their own minds. This is what this number of Secrets of Heaven is here for. 5758. After death, a human being cannot be admitted into heaven until he acknowledges at heart that nothing of goodness or truth is from himself, but all are from the Lord, and whatever is from himself is nothing but evil. The fact that this is so is shown to a person after death by many experiences. The angels in heaven plainly perceive that all goodness and truth are from the Lord, and moreover, that by the Lord they are withheld from evil and held in good, and so in truth, and this by a mighty force. It has been given me plainly to perceive this now for many years, and also I have been given to perceive that insofar as I have been left to my own or to myself, I have been flooded with evils, and so far as I have been withheld by the Lord from myself, I have been lifted up from evil into good. Therefore, to claim truth and goodness to oneself is contrary to the universal perception that reigns in heaven, as well as contrary to the acknowledgement that all salvation is of mercy. That is, of himself a person is in hell, but of mercy he is drawn out of there by the Lord. A human being cannot be in humility, nor consequently can he receive the Lord's mercy, for this flows in only into a humble heart, unless he acknowledges that there is nothing but evil from himself, and all good is from the Lord. And we're describing an angelic state here. Why do you call me good? Do you call me good because you see that I'm God? Do you see that? Do you call me good because you don't quite believe it? Do you think I'm to deny my own goodness? What is it going on here? But he's trying to draw out in us this opportunity to make a decision. That's so much of what Jesus does in the New Testament, is he's putting himself out there, he's showing his abilities, he's showing his teaching, and then he's trying to draw out a response. Who do you say I am?